Good day, Norfolk. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Cole Bushnell, your fire chief since 2004. And this is the first opportunity probably in a long time to have a chance to sit down and really have a discussion with those of you in the community regarding the fire department staffing, its organization, and management. So with that in mind, as a brief introduction, I'd ask you to sit back and relax as we take you down a tour of the Norfolk Fire Department. The first thing we'd like to talk about is the fire chief and the deputy fire chief. Here in Norfolk, we're so fortunate to have Deputy Chief Peter Petruchik as the fire department's deputy. The one thing about the chief and the deputy chief is that you need at least one of these individuals present at every emergency to ensure that the scene is run as effectively and as safely as possible. And this holds true in a number of situations that we're involved with. You could ask yourself, what could possibly go wrong? Without proper organization, or sometimes we refer to at the station as adult supervision, you never could know. And that's one of the things that we stress in terms of how the chief and the deputy work together. It's always important, as I said earlier, to have one or the other present to assist. Norfolk staffs 4 work groups, each consisting of an officer and 2 firefighter paramedics. And one of the things that we always talk about is you need a 4th firefighter or 4th individual present to ensure that the emergency scene is run as safely as possible and the best service is delivered to the community. As I said earlier, either myself as the chief or the deputy chief generally represent that 4th person. But of course, some of the things you have to think about in terms of the department is we obviously serve 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'd like to think that I'm available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but that obviously isn't the case. The deputy chief is in the same situation. So one of the things that we have done starting last year is we took measures to ensure that either one of us are available at all times. Of course, one of the problems that comes into play is if the deputy chief is working the shift, we have to ensure that he is prepared to serve in the position of the fire chief. And to do that, we have to remove him from the fire apparatus and place him into a car so that the service can be rendered. Trying to run an incident from the front seat of the fire apparatus in what's known as the company officer's chair is not effective and certainly makes the situation tough in terms of confinement of what the options are available for that individual. In situations where the deputy and I are both away from Norfolk, and obviously we both have personal lives that we like to participate in, and our families love that as well, when we're both away, then we ensure that we bring in one extra firefighter so that the shift officer has the ability to respond to incidents riding in a car to make the decisions that need to be made at that level. So what does a properly staffed engine company look like? This is a mutual aid fire that we responded to back in April of 17. It ended up being a 3rd alarm fire in the town of Franklin, but you can see that there's 4 firefighters present. You have the deputy chief on the right with the white helmet. On the left, you have the shift officer, Lieutenant Mike Finland, and you have 2 firefighters manning the hose line. That's the safest way and the best way to handle an individual incident is with 4. And certainly, a lot of things that have happened in the fire service over the last few years has been the introductory of science, quantitative science, to determine what are the best levels of staffing for a department, and particularly for a shift. The National Institutes of Science and Technology have spent a great deal of time and effort providing that analysis on a quantifiable basis. What they've come back with is a resounding quantification that 4 is the magic number. We run at 3, but usually either myself or the deputy represent the 4th person. So what happens on a bad day? This is what an improperly staffed engine company would look like. This is a fire on Tucker Road in 2016. On arrival, we were told that we had a person trapped in the building. The engine company is staffed with 3. There's 1 firefighter operating the pump, and there are 2 firefighters stretching the initial hose line on a well-involved building. Fortunately, the occupant that was trapped self-evacuated, and both the occupants were transported by ambulance to a trauma center for evaluation, and fortunately their injuries were relatively minor. But this is a problem that's encountered, whether it's a major fire, and this went to 2 alarms here in Norfolk, or whether it's a medical, where we're delivering services through the advanced life support system of the paramedics. It's tantamount, again, to our ability to serve the community, to have the proper staffing present. I'd like to take you back really to my childhood. This is one of the first books that I received when I was young, and you can probably tell why I ended up being in the fire service. This is a Rand McNally book from 1954, and I'm not going to share with you my date of birth. But this is Johnny the Fireman. Johnny the Fireman was a book that I read over and over again, and some of the things that happen in this story certainly still hold true today. Johnny visits Aunt Jane in a small town, and Johnny, being certainly an enthusiastic boy and enjoying the ability to go to the fire station, meets the fire chief, who happens to be, in that day, referred to as the paid person. And Johnny asks him, what happens when there's a fire? You're the only person here to go put the fire out. The fire chief tells him a story, and the story that he tells them is that he has the ability to call upon the butcher, the baker, the cobbler, the hardware store man, and also the gas station man. And those references, of course, were very much in play in the 1950s. So you can see that the fire chief had really 5 people he could draw upon that obviously worked and lived in the community, and the fact that he was there as the 6th person. So he had 6 people to draw upon. Johnny was really amazed and wanted to know how the system worked. And one day, there was a fire, and Johnny ran along with the fire engine to the call. And again, how many firefighters are responding? Well, they're numbered on there. Back in the old days, the good old days, when firefighters could ride the back of the apparatus and enjoy the tradition of being hardy people as they responded to an emergency and cling to the side of the apparatus. You can see that there are 5 people which represent the butcher, the baker, the cobbler, the hardware store man, and the gas station man, and the fire chief is driving the apparatus. They're responding in with a total of 6. So given that, you have a good idea of what the staffing takes care of. But let's regress just for a moment and review what we talked about earlier with the fire chief and the deputy fire chief. We talk about span of control in operating a scene. And we're fortunate here that people in our town government, our elected officials, our appointed officials, have seen some of the things that we do. For instance, incidents where I've been away from Norfolk, and I'll go back to 2016, the Bridie Lane fire. It was a rapidly moving woods fire, forest fire, that much like fires that you would see in California, fire was impinging upon homes on Bridie Lane. The deputy chief was the only chief available at the time. I was gone. He ran the incident, and we were able to stop the fire using large caliber hose lines to stop the fire from moving into the homes. Again, in 2016, he had to handle an incident on Barnstable Road where multiple mutual aid companies came in. In 2017, the Sweetland Farm Main Street fire, and that moved along to 2017, a house fire on Kingsbury Road. Again, he's in a situation where he's removed from the company level, where he's not in the seat on the apparatus as a company officer, but he's responding as the acting chief. He's responding as the individual who's responsible for the overall management of the incident. So, one of the things that you have to be aware of is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, dictates that before the fire department can respond to an incident and enter a burning building, we must assemble with a total of 4 firefighters. And without 4 firefighters, the only thing that we're able to do under the guise of the regulation is to perform a search and rescue. Again, we go back to the fact that we need to generate the 4th person. We have 3 people on a shift, generally speaking, and how that 4th person comes into play is of tantamount importance. We talk a little bit about callback, of bringing back the off-duty career staff, and the call staff. Just want to give you some real information. In 1998, 20 years ago, the department was comprised of 25 staff, all of which resided in the community. 10 years later, in 2008, that number went to 20, and 15 lived in the community. And of course, by 2008, we were at 12 career staff. Today, we have a total of 16 people, 11 of which live in the community. So you can see the numbers of people that we have available to draw upon are rapidly declining. And that's something to really keep in mind as we look at the situation in terms of how we develop a response to our incidents. One of the things to keep in mind is, generally speaking, on the shifts, we're talking of 3. And providing ALS to the community, the ambulance has to transport with 2, which leaves us with 1 person left in the station, 1 firefighter. It could be an officer, it could be the firefighter, depending how the shift is laid out. Think in terms of a subsequent incident coming in and what that 1 person is going to be able to do. Not a lot. We're fortunate that the community and government saw fit to add the ability for the Norfolk Fire Department to recall staff, that each time the ambulance transports, that we can build our shift strength back to what we have on shift. So in this particular incident, you've got the ambulance is transported, we recall 2 staff based upon their availability, and at least it gets us back to a minimum level of staffing. One of the things to remember is that we're asking primarily the people who live here in Norfolk to be available almost on a 24/7 basis. Probably one of the only occupations that you could find where your job is requiring that type of commitment. One of the things that has happened is as recently as 3 years ago, the town was gracious enough to provide us with, quote unquote, the 13th firefighter. So what we serve with now is during the day, the weekdays, Monday through Friday, we have 4 people on a shift, which builds us to the strength that we need to do to respond adequately to an emergency. Now when the ambulance transports, we're recalling 2 people to maintain that level of service. And that's exceedingly important. And one of the things just to think about in terms of the overall level of staffing of the fire department, in 2004, we had 8 career staff. In 2004, whether your opinion is pro or con, I was brought to Norfolk, and one of the missions I had was to bring ALS. So to do that, between 2005 and 2006, we brought in 4 additional personnel to serve as paramedics to bring us to the paramedic level. We talked about station coverage, and in 2014, the town was good enough to provide funding for that recall. And in 2016, as we look at this particular slide, is where we got to the 13th position, which gave us the ability to have 4 people on duty during the daytime shift. But one of the things you have to look at in terms of where we stand under national standards, one of the things that we're required to do under national standards is to ensure that we bring, upon response to a fire emergency, 10 people to the scene within a 10-minute response, 80% of the time. Unfortunately, it's difficult to do. And one of the things that we have done to be proactive is to start automatic mutual aid. We divide the town of Norfolk at Main Street. All of the even side of the road is called District 2, where a Franklin Engine Company responds with 5 firefighters. And everything on the odd side of the street, of Main Street, receives a Rentham Engine Company, again with 5. Our records show that we can put 6 people on the scene of a fire within 10 minutes. However, the mutual aid generally takes 15 minutes to arrive, so it's 15 minutes before we can top that 10 firefighter requirement. This only comes into play in the event that a tragedy happens at an emergency scene. Hopefully that never does, but these are the contexts under which we would be judged by agencies that would be in charge of such investigations. So let's take a look at what generally happens in Norfolk. And we'll look at it from a 5-year view of the data in terms of what time of the day that we respond to incidents. And generally, the peak period is between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. And if you want to add in 5 and 6 as part of a 10-hour day, you can. When we hired the 13th firefighter works Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 on a general basis. One of the things that we're looking to do, and we put forward in this year's budget, is to hire the 14th firefighter. And we can adjust that daytime schedule so that we can expand those hours out to 5 and 6 o'clock to increase the availability of what we have for staffing. And it's very important to keep in mind that while our biggest workload takes place generally during the daytime, our highest potential for tragedy in the community, unfortunately, is during the nights. We'd like to certainly say that we want a staff to meet both, but being a prudent administrator, one of the things that we're trying to do is take the immediate problem at hand, and that's responding to the workload that's present. One of the things that we're always asked is about the call firefighter situation. Norfolk was traditionally a call firefighter operation until really the advent of advanced life support. And advanced life support with the paramedics, we have reached out and changed patient outcomes, close to 3,000 people since 2005 when we introduced the program. The number of people that we've actually saved, if you want to talk in terms of cardiac arrest, are probably relatively small when you look at the numbers, but we look at in terms of difficulty breathing, allergic reactions, the situations where the paramedics can use any of their protocol which allows them in-service operation in the field. In other words, we bring the ER to your doorstep when we respond. But looking at call, this is a project that was put forth by the fire chief in Auburn, who did a great deal of research for the fire district that they serve in. And they surveyed a number of departments, and they found that between 1997 and 2007, 11 of the 24 departments, basically half of the departments that they had, saw a 25% decline in their call staffing. Between 2007 and 2017, they found 11 departments now experiencing a 50% decline in the call staff. And the reasons that were put forth in their study showed that it was a time commitment, it was time away from their homes, and it was the amount of training that goes into being a call firefighter. And the other thing that came into play was the vast number of career positions now available in the Commonwealth as turnover takes place in many of the fire departments throughout the state. And what's happening is that more and more call firefighters are being trained, and as they're being trained, they have a skill set that's certainly desired by departments looking to hire. And that's something that we have been confronted with here in Norfolk. Over the years, we've seen a number of our staff move on, and that becomes a problem. Presently, we're down to about 4 or 5 call firefighters, and of that group, 3 of them are off-duty career firefighters from other communities. The other thing we have to talk in terms of the call firefighter situation is what are the direct costs to the department and the community to bring in a firefighter? And this is something that we brought to the town back in 2013. We did an analysis, and if a clerical person is hired in town government, there's generally very little cost, if any, associated with the hiring. DPW is a physical for approximately $500. A police officer, the ancillary cost for doing a physical, doing agility testing, and some basic equipment is $2,000. Unfortunately, firefighters are required to wear a great deal of specialized equipment beyond the idea that we need to go for a physical and our physical agility testing. When we look at terms of bringing firefighters in, the actual cost for a career firefighter coming in the door is $8,000. For a call firefighter is not much less than that. What we've tried to do over the last few years is we've tried to bring in incrementally 2 or 3 call firefighters each year around the July period. But to do so, we're still required to provide them with protective gear. So out of pocket, we're looking at a minimum of providing them with close to $3,000 to $4,000 worth of equipment. Norfolk does not have a treasure trove or a surplus of firefighting equipment that we can give, and that becomes an upfront cost. And then we're talking in terms of training. Bringing in a call firefighter takes a minimum of a year to 18 months to be sufficiently trained. And also, we can only hire those people who have an EMT, emergency medical technician, because of the amount of medical response that we respond to. So you're looking for someone to come in the door that's already given between 80 and 100 hours to achieve an EMT rating. And this is for something that will be basically a part-time job situation. So those are some of the things that we're confronted with in terms of looking forward to bring in additional call people. We have to monitor that very closely, and we've done a good job doing that. But let's take a look at the bigger picture. Norfolk's becoming the Paw Sox or the Providence Bruins. Why? Because the people that we're bringing in and the types of training that we do here is such that I can tell you unequivocally that our people are coveted by other fire departments in the area. In fact, one of our originally firefighters that we brought on career is now the fire chief of the town of Holden. And one of our paramedics was originally hired back in 2005, joined him. We have a lieutenant serving in the Norwood Fire Department who started off as call. We have another call person that spent maybe 6 months with us and moved on to the Bridgewater Fire Department. Foxborough has 2 of our people in Rentham. Over the last 3 years, we've lost to other departments 1 member each year. I can tell you that the type of training that we provide is each year we are involved in doing live fire training at least once a year with a donated structure. And the type of firefighting training that takes place replicates the conditions under which a firefighter responds in a real emergency. So given that, and given the types of training that takes place beside, again, I give certainly a tip of the hat to Deputy Chief Petruchik, is the reason why our people are coveted the way they are. I can certainly tell you as well is our people are very well versed and very capable in handling all emergencies here in Norfolk. Mutual aid, we talked a little bit about it. Mutual aid, we're very fortunate. We bring in a great deal of mutual aid in Norfolk just to be on the safe side. Here, you have 4 chiefs that have come in to assist us at an incident. This is the Tucker Road fire that I talked of earlier. We have fire chiefs from Bellingham, Rentham, Walpole, and Franklin present. Each one of those fire chiefs, when they arrived on the fire ground, were given specific jobs to handle and part of the overall organization and management of the incident. But, as I said earlier, it's 15 minutes as we bring that mutual aid in. I'd like to really drive home a point, and can do so citing Clear and Present Danger from Paramount Pictures in 1994. Harrison Ford portraying one of the Clancy roles in a true spy novel version. And in this particular situation, Jack Ryan, the character portrayed by Harrison Ford, is presented with danger in terms of what his operation was involved with. As I said earlier, our staffing level is getting low, and we're at that point where I can honestly say that this is the incident and this is the situation where we are. So, what are the problems confronting the fire department relative to staffing? We talked earlier about command and control with myself and the deputy chief. And our ability to effectively provide services are really integral to having either one of us available. And one of the things that we do is we have to balance our budget to ensure that if we're both not here, as I said earlier, that we have to have a 4th firefighter available on the shift. If I'm not available and the deputy chief is working, we have to remove him from the operation and place him in a car so he can serve in that position. That's very important. One of the other things we need to do is what we look at is we're looking at a minimum to staff each day with 4 firefighters and paramedics. So what we're doing moving forward is we're certainly looking to try to hire the 14th person to ensure that during the daytime period, when the greatest workload exists for the Norfolk Fire Department, that we have the ability to respond. Going down the road, I can tell you that I'm starting to reach the end of my career here with Norfolk. Some people are probably pretty happy about that as I speak. Maybe some aren't. But the goal that I have, that I'm bringing forward, and that I truly will look to foster in my remaining years here in Norfolk, is to get all of our shifts with 4 firefighter paramedics on board. Staffing us at 4 is the number that we need on a 24-hour basis, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to bring that forward. So, you sat back, you heard what I had to say, and you might ask yourself, if you believe this is a problem, what can you do to help? Tweets, emails, calls, to wherever you think they need to go, particularly the fire department. The other thing I would do is I would challenge each and every one that watched this program. use critical thinking. And as you critique what I had to say here today, call me and tell me what you think of what the types of information that's been relayed. Because in turn, our challenge is to go forward in dealing with our town government, with our town administrator, our board of selectmen, our advisory board. As I said, we're very grateful for the support that they've shown us over the years. And what we're looking to do now is to make sure that as the years to come, that we can provide a level of service that you've grown to expect, anticipate, and from what we've heard, desire. So I thank you for taking the time today to view this little program. I hope you found some humor in it. I know I did putting it together. And once again, I ask you, reach out at any time to us at the fire department, and I will leave you with my cell phone number, which is 508-958-1837. I answer at all time. Don't hesitate. Again, thank you to our town government for the support. Thank you, the community of Norfolk, for your support. Have a good day.